on AWS, it is part of your EC2, right? So before I talk more about EC2, how things work and all of that, I want to understand one thing from all of you. Okay, in your on-premises, if you want a server, in your on-premises, if you want a server, what are the specifications that you look forward to? Let's say you're responsible to procure a server in your on-premises. So what all parameters would you look forward to? Storage, okay. Storage space, okay. CPU. No, in your on-premises, ARM, not on your cloud. Storage, CPU are only two relevant answers so far. RAM, okay. Speed of processing, that is again CPU. Internet connectivity, okay. Motherboard, do you really specify which motherboard you want? You're responsible to procure a server. So the very first thing which you specify is your operating system. You tell which operating system you require. Then you specify kind of processor you require, amount of RAM you require. Then you specify amount of storage you require. Yes or no? That is the order in which you go. These are the major parameters which you define. You'll say that I need so and so operating system. I need machine with this many processors, this amount of RAM, this amount of storage, right? And it should support a throughput of so and so value. So when you want a server on cloud, you pretty well will do the same thing. You pretty much will do the same thing. So let us see how it works. So under services, you have compute. Under compute, you have EC2. Click on EC2, and you should be able to connect to. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just checking with someone. All right. So it's again people started raising hands. Humble request, please don't raise hands. If you have question, please shoot your question directly. All right. So all you have to do is say services. Under services, you have compute. Under compute, you have EC2. Click on EC2. Right? EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. Now, if you want a server on cloud, on AWS cloud, your EC2 is a service where you can configure it. Right? Here we don't call them as a server, we'll call them as an instances. Under your EC2, we don't call them as servers, we call them as a instances. To configure your instance, say launch instance. So Launching an EC2 instance on a cloud is a 7-step process. Starting with step 1 where you choose your AMI, step 2 you define your instance type, step 3 you define your additional configuration details, step 4 you define your storage, step 5 you add tags, step 6 you add security group, 7 you review all of this detail, and 8 you launch your instance. There are 7 major parameters that you need to define, and in the 8th step you will be able to launch your instance. The very first step is you're choosing your AMI, Amazon Machine Image. Now understand what your Amazon Machine Image is all about. Amazon Machine Image is nothing but your operating system file, your boot file, your program file, right? It's a kind of image of your operating system file, your application file, your boot file, and your program file. Now when you want a server in your on-premises, you say that I want a Windows server. So obviously there is an operating system that you specify, and vendor provides machine with that specific operating system. So in your cloud also, since it's going to be a virtual, there is not going to be any physical server. So here you will, in the very first step, you will define what operating system you need, what application files you need, what program files you require. Here you will define what operating system, what program files, what application files you require. And this AMI is what will contain your boot file as well, right? So you have various choices available. You have various choices available, right? If you notice here, around 41 AMI options are available, which are coming with a different operating system. You have Linux AMI, you have Red Hat Linux, you have SUSE Enterprise, Ubuntu, Microsoft Windows 2019 base, 2019 base with container, 2019 with SQL 27, a standard edition, 2019 with SQL 2017 Enterprise Edition, 2019 with SQL 2019 Standard Enterprise, 20H2 Core Base, 2016 base Debian Server. So many options to choose from. So many options to choose from. Now, if you feel, Prashant, this 41 options are not enough, I would need more choices. How many of you have that kind of requirement here? How many have that requirement? How many feel that these 41 options are not enough for me? I might want more choices. Anyone? How do I know which is good OS to the choice to choose? So depending on your application, what kind of application you want to run, depending on, compatibility with your application, with your softwares, with your middlewares, you will decide which operating system to go with. There's nothing called good, bad, but some application which should be compatible with your operating system which is more compatible with your application is what you need to choose. Am I making sense? So now if you feel that these 41 choices are not enough, don't worry. Click on community AMI. Under your community AMI, you have 67,000 options to choose from. You have 67,000 options to choose from. And not only this, you have different operating system options. You can choose from Amazon Linux, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, Gentoo, OpenSUSE, other Linux, Red Hat Linux, SUSE Linux, Ubuntu, Windows. These are the list of softwares. These are the list of operating system which are available, and you can choose. Depending on your business requirement, right? Depending on your business requirement, you can choose the operating system of your choice. So not only this, right? You still have choices on deciding the architecture. Whether you want 32-bit architecture with 8086 processor, 64-bit architecture with 8086 processor, or 64-bit ARM, right? 64-bit ARM. So you can even decide the architecture, the processor architecture, the type of processor you want to go. Whether you want to go with 8086 processor or you want to go with ARM processor, right? So apart from that, AWS also gives you a choice to decide your root device type. You can select your root device type as EBS or your instant store. So EBS, as in the last week we have discussed, it is nothing but a kind of hard disk which is attached to your server. It is nothing but kind of hard disk which is attached to your server, right? So now that I'm going to launch my server. Now that I'm going to launch my server, so can I say it requires some local storage? Yes or no? Why it requires that local storage? Because that is where your operating system file, your boot file, your program file, and all of that can be stored. Agree with me? So for example, in my laptop, the operating system files are sitting in my C drive. Yes or no? The operating system file is sitting in my C drive. Agree with me? So is this C drive part of my hard disk which is attached to my machine? So can I say the operating system file is locally available on this machine for my laptop? So similarly, on your server, on your virtual server, if you want your operating system file, program file, application file, all of this to be locally available, in addition, you require a local storage to store your application data and stuff, then you would need something called as EBS. EBS, as we discussed, it is nothing but your elastic block storage, which is attached to your server. Now, by default, majority of them are root device type as EBS only. Root device type as EBS. That means the operating system file, the boot file, and all of that would be locally available to the in the hard disk, and that hard disk would be attached to the server. That is root device type as EBS. Okay. Is it stored externally? Again, I'm saying it's not external storage. It is something which is attached to your hard, your laptop, your server. Then you have second option under root device type, which is your instant store. You have second option under your root device type, which is your instance store. Now when I talk about instant store, okay, I want to understand from you guys, how many of you guys are aware about booting your machine over network boot, or booting your machines over internet and stuff? Aware of this kind of setup where you don't have operating system file, don't have program files, you don't have application file locally available. The machine is booted over the network. Aware of this? Yes, no? Let's be quick to respond. Okay. Couple of people say yes, couple of people say no. So help me understand one thing. Everyone has visited ATM, right? Everyone must have visited ATMs. So in your ATMs, do you have hard disk attached, or it is just a monitor? What is your thought? Someone says hard disk attached. So let me tell you, your ATM is just a monitor. There is no locally available hard disk. There is no locally available hard disk. Guys, on your ATM machines, there is no local storage available. It is booted over the network. It is booted over the network. Now, what does it signify? Please understand very clearly. This machine does not have their operating system file locally available because there is no storage. So they don't have operating system file locally available. So without operating system, can your machines boot? Without operating systems, can your machine boot up? Yes or no? Everyone. When you don't have operating system, let's say in your laptop itself, you remove that hard disk. In your laptop itself, you remove that hard disk. So if there is no hard disk, there is no operating system file, by default, your machine cannot boot up. Agree with me? You need to boot your machine over the network in that case. Or you need to have an external bootable pen drives. If you recall some 5 years, 10 years back when we used to use our desktops and our hard disk used to get corrupted very often. So at that point of time when hard disk get corrupted, your machine does not start locally. So what you used to do is you used to put your operating system file in a pen drives and you used to use your machines using pen drives, using those bootable pen drives. Do you recall? Yes. So here you attach pen drive and you are booting your machine from an external storage. But in case of your instant store, your operating system file, your program file, your boot file, all of this are present in S3 repository of AWS. This AMI file is present in the S3 repository of AWS. It is completely managed by AWS. So every time your machine has to boot, it has to fetch that AMI file from the S3 repository of AWS. So your EBS is your persistent storage. So any data which is stored will persist in your EBS. Say example, you stored something, you shut down your machine and start again after 2 days, 3 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Still your data would persist if it is your EBS attached storage. But in case of instant store, where you don't have any storage available, right? Any data which you store or anything, the moment you shut down your machine, your data would be lost. The moment you shut down your machine, your data would be lost. So your instant store is your ephemeral storage, short-lived storage. As long as your machine is up and running, your data would be available. The moment your machine is shut, you shut down your machine, all your data would be lost, and when you start again, you will not find that data available. Guys, are we all clear what your instant store is all about? We did not talk about it in our module 3. So that was for a purpose that we did not talk about it in our module 3. But now, so as part of your module 4, I thought to discuss about it. So before I move forward, I want to quickly check with all of you. Are we clear what is the difference between EBS and instant store? Instant store is your ephemeral or short-lived storage. App update, where does it store? What do you mean by app update? You mean application update? So that's what I'm telling. Your instant store does not have any local storage by default. Your AMI files are available in S3 repository, and it is going to fetch those files from S3 repository and boot your machine. So it is only a machine with a RAM. There is no storage, in very simple language. Guys, are we all clear? Can I move forward now? Yes. A lot of people, I haven't heard from you for a long time now. So just want to quickly check. Are we clear? Am I making sense? Vinith Vijay, long time I haven't heard from you. Vinay Kumar Reddy, long time I haven't heard from you. Wahida Begum, long time I haven't heard from you. Tapsi Roy, long time I haven't heard from you. Rizwan, Rajesha, Preeti. Am I making sense? Kaustab Chaudhary, Gagan Singla, Bitika, Anjana. Guys, so quickly summarizing your EBS and instant store, pay attention. Your EBS is nothing but a local storage like a hard disk attached to your machine. Instant store is like you don't have any local storage. Okay, you don't have any local storage. The AMI file is present in S3 repository. Whenever your machine is supposed to boot, it will fetch that AMI file from S3 repository, which is managed by AWS. If you select your root device type as EBS, your AMI file will be locally available on your server. If you select instant store, there is no AMI file locally available. Yes, are we all clear? Your EBS is your persistent storage. Your instant store is your ephemeral storage or your temporary storage or short-lived storage. I hope now it makes sense to everyone, right? So, boot AMI machine without EBS. Yes, when you say boot AMI machine without EBS, what do you mean by that, Manoj? Is EBS more secure? See, having a local storage attached to your machine is more preferred. I would not say about secure, right? So both are secure in a way. Both are secure in a way. But having a local storage available is more preferred. It is more preferred. Why? Because your machines can boot up quickly. Your machines can boot up quickly, and you will have your data persisting. You'll have your data persisting. So ideally for your prod environment, it is always recommended that you go with your EBS based machines. Root device to be as EBS. For your prod environment, right? It is always recommended that you use your EBS backed or EBS, backed instances. Root device type as EBS. Okay. Your instant store is normally preferred in your test environment. The cost of your instant store based machines is comparatively lower because there you only pay for compute and not for storage. Okay. When you go with your EBS, it is costly in comparison to your instant store based instances. The reason being, in your instant store, you don't pay for any attached storage. Okay. But whereas in EBS, you'll have to pay for attached storage. All right. Are we all clear? Can I now move forward? Great. So now if you feel that this 67,000 options are not sufficient for you, then you have something called as AWS Marketplace. Now AWS Marketplace is where you can get any third party vendor related AMIs and their products. Okay. Suppose you want to launch any blockchain related product, you want any application server product. So you have so many third party vendors, applications and software which are available. Okay. And you can choose one from your choice. Obviously it will come with cost again. So coming back to our quick start here, I'll select Microsoft Windows Server 2019 AMI. Okay. In AWS Instance Store, machine is available or not? It is available. Why is it not available? So you have a choice here. You can filter out easily. Manoj, select Instance Store. You have a choice. You can select Instance Store based machine. But ideally, the preferred is your root device type as EBS. So majority of them are listed as EBS. So I'm selecting Microsoft Windows Server 2019 base. Now, the moment I do that, right, it takes me to the second step. And in second step, it will ask me to decide my instance type. Now, instance type is nothing but deciding number of CPUs I require and amount of RAM I require. So in our on-premises, we define the processing capabilities on the basis of the CPUs. Even here on the basis of CPU, you will be deciding the processing capabilities of your machine. But since this is a cloud, it is a virtual machine. So you will have something called as virtual CPU. It would not be a physical CPU, it would be virtual CPU. So depending on the kind of application you want to run, amount of processing capabilities you require, you can decide the machine with the appropriate configuration. So you can say whether you want a machine with one virtual CPU, 1 GB of RAM, one virtual CPU, 2 GB of RAM, two virtual CPU, 4 GB of RAM, two virtual CPU, 8 GB of RAM, and so on. You have so many different choices available, right? You can decide the size of your machine depending on your business requirement. Okay. You can decide size of your machine depending on your business requirement. So 8 virtual CPU, 32 GB of RAM, and can support network throughput of up to 5 gigabit. Right. Further, if I scroll down, you notice you have so many choices. 32 virtual CPU, 256 GB of RAM, 32 virtual CPU, 244 GB of RAM, 32 virtual CPU, 488 GB of RAM, 10 gig of network throughput is supported. Further, if I scroll down, 48 virtual CPU, 96 GB of RAM, 48 virtual CPU, 384 GB of RAM, right? So depending on your business requirement, you can decide a machine of your choice. So here, if you notice, 128 virtual CPU, 3904 GB of RAM. 128 virtual CPU with 3904 GB of RAM, right? And it can support SSD storage of 1920 into 2. That is close to 4000 GB of SSD storage with a network throughput of around 25 gigabit. So depending on your business needs and requirement, you will decide which machine to go ahead with. And depending on this, the cost will also vary. If you say machine with one virtual CPU and 1 GB RAM, the cost would be different. And if you select a machine with higher configuration, the cost would be different. Guys, are we all clear? What is your step 2 all about? Choosing your instance type. Is everyone clear with it? Yes. So I select T2 Micro, which is the only instance which is eligible for your free tier. Say next, configure instance detail. The moment you click on that, it will take you to step 3. In step 3, the very first thing which they ask you is, you defined in the step 1 what operating system you want. You defined in the step 2 what should be the configuration specifications, like how many virtual CPU, how much of RAM, right? Now in step 3, tell me how many machines of this particular configuration you require. Number of instances is nothing but how many machines, how many servers of this configuration you require. You want 1, you want 2, you want 10, depending on your business requirement. You tell us how many machines of this particular configuration you require, and whatever number you specify, those number of machines would be launched. You'll have those number of machines available for you to work with. So now I'm saying only one. Okay, I'm saying in only one. Depending on my business requirement, if I want 10 machines with a similar configuration, I can directly say 10 here. Or if I want 20 machines with a similar configuration, I can directly say 20, right? Any limitations for selecting instances? There is no as such limitation for selecting instances. But in general, if you want to know what are the limitations with your EC2, then please refer to the document here. So this will talk about the limitations of your EC2. Then the next option is your purchasing option. The next option is your purchasing option. Now, what is your purchasing option? Please understand very clearly. In AWS, right? They provide in AWS, they provide your instances, okay? In 3 choices. You have something called as reserved instances. You have something called as on-demand instances. You have something called as spot instances. In AWS, you have 3 choices of instances: reserved instance, on-demand instance, and spot instances. Now under reserved, you have further more choices. Under reserved, you have further choices: all upfront, partial upfront, no upfront. So you have 3 choices: reserved instance, on-demand instance, and spot instance. In terms of the payment or in terms of the cost, AWS gives you 3 choices. While launching your instance, it says you can launch it under either of this category. Either as a part of your reserved instance, or part of your on-demand instance, or part of your spot instance. Now, when to go with each of this, let's understand that first, and then we'll discuss further. So let's say if you're an organization XYZ, let's say you're an organization XYZ, right? You know that in span of next 1 year, I would need at least 10 to 15 server of this particular configuration. I would need at least
10 servers or 15 servers of this particular configuration. So AWS says that if you are an organization who is well planned about your technical requirement, that yes, in span of for next 1 year I would need this many servers, or next 2 years I would need this many servers, or for next 3 years I would need this many servers. So AWS says, why don't you make a reservation in advance? You already know that this is your technical roadmap. You would have this amount of requirement bare minimum. You would need this number of servers for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever is your business timeline. Then why don't you make reservation? So AWS says, I have a choice. You make a reservation. And if you make a reservation, I have further options for you. Let's say you're reserving an instance for 1 year. And if you're willing to pay for that 1 year in advance, you make entire payment all upfront. Right today itself. Let's say if you're reserving an instance for 1 year, you make the entire payment upfront right today. Then I can offer you around 35% of discount. That is your all upfront. Second option is you make reservation today. If the entire cost is, let's say for 1 year, it is around $1,200. It's okay if you don't pay entire amount upfront. You pay partial upfront. Let's say 50%. So today you make your payment of $600 and remaining you pay month on month basis as an EMI kind of thing. If you go with partial upfront option, I can offer you somewhere around 25 to 30% of discount. Then the last option is no upfront payment. AWS says it's okay even if you don't pay anything, but you make a reservation. And if you're making a reservation, I can offer you a payment of discount of around 20 to 25%. These are three options under your reserved instance. So reserved instance are only suitable for those kind of organization who are technically well planned, who know that in span of next 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, I would bare minimum need this number of servers or this number of instances, so that it makes no difference, it makes no difference if I make a reservation in advance. Now the advantage of reserved instance is you get to enjoy good amount of discounts. But there is an other side of reserved instance which you should be aware of. So let's say you reserve 10 instances today. After 6 months, you feel that I require only five instances. I don't need it anymore. There is no option of refund. So AWS says if you made a reservation, whether you use or you don't use, you will be billed for it. Whether you use or you don't use, you will be charged for it. Reservation made is made. It is like non-refundable flight ticket. It is like non-refundable flight ticket. Whether you travel or not, you don't get any amount back, right? Just like that is your reserved instance. Are we all clear with the reserved instance part? Everyone? Then you have something called as on-demand instance. You have something called as on-demand instance. On-demand instance is nothing but you don't want to make any kind of commitment with AWS. You're like, I don't want to say whether I want an instance for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. No commitment. If I want to use instance for 1 day, I'll use it for 1 day. If I want to use it for 1 year, I'll use it for 1 year. So you just charge me for what I'm using. AWS says it's okay, but I cannot give you any discount. So there are no specific discounts. Okay. You're not making any reservation, no commitment. So if you want an instance for 1 hour, you use it for 1 hour and you terminate it. You want an instance for 1 day, you use it for 1 day and you can stop that machine or terminate that machine. And if you want an instance for 1 year, you can still continue using it for 1 year. So there is no commitment. Whenever you want, you can launch. Whenever you want, you can terminate. as per your business demand, right? That is your on-demand instance. Next is your spot instance. Now, AWS have a lot of unused compute capacity. AWS have a lot of unused compute capacity, which AWS doesn't want to waste because it is an unused compute capacity. Why to waste it? So AWS says, let's monetize this. Now, how did they monetize this? Is by introducing bid system. By introducing bid system. Now, what is this bid system? So they say that, we'll give away our unused compute to, people on the basis of bidding system. Let's say there is a machine which costs $10 in your on demand. The cost of this, let's assume this EC2 instance, T2 micro, which we selected. Let's assume the cost of that instance is $10 per hour. So the same instance you can get in $2 per hour, okay, under your spot instance. Now this works on the basis of bidding. So for example, if I say request spot instance, then this is the current bid price. This is the current bid price. For me to have ownership of this machine, my bid price should be higher than this price. My bid price should be higher than this price. So I will have the ownership of this particular machine. Now this bid value is applicable only for 1 hour. After 1 hour, if you want to retain ownership, again you will have to bid. So this bidding takes place every hour. Once your bid is highest, you have ownership of that machine for 1 hour. After 1 hour, again the same bidding process you have to go through. So this spot instance are not suitable for your production environment because you cannot sit back and bid continuously for your machines. Okay, you cannot sit back and continuously bid, right, every 1 hour. That is not possible. And in any of the hour, if you lose your bid, you lose ownership of your machine. All your data is lost, your machine is lost. You cannot retrieve any of the information. So spot instances are mainly suitable for those kind of setup where you want to test something, you want to test some behavior, check some functionality, check some hardware, check some specifications of the machine, right? In those kind of situation, you go with your spot instance. Is spot instance available in your free tier? No. Guys, are we all clear about 3 different choices of your instances: reserved instance, on-demand instance, and spot instance? Everyone? Yes? Making sense with this? We talked about reserved, we talked about on-demand, and we talked about spot instance. Free tier comes in which category? On-demand instance. On-demand instance. By default, if you don't define a reserved or spot, then by default it is always on-demand instance. Okay, so that was about your purchasing option I thought to talk about. So here it was only talking specific to spot instance, but then I thought this is a good opportunity to discuss about reserved and on-demand also. So I thought to discuss about it. Now next comes your network, subnet, and public IP address. Now as a network, when you're deploying your server, you usually decide, right, whether this server should be part of your prod environment, whether it should be part of your dev environment, whether it should be part of your QA environment. Yes or no? Whenever you have a server, you decide this first, that okay, this server, will it be part of my prod, dev, or QA environment? And accordingly, the IP address and everything is configured. Agree with me? So this network, this VPC will give you that choice. So we have detailed discussion on our VPC in our module 7. So there I'll talk more in detail about your network, subnet and public IP. For now, just understand here you can define which environment you want your machine to be hosted in. Someone was also asking this question. Is your question answered? From long time, the same question was getting repeated. So is that question answered now? How to define whether it will be part of my prod, dev or QA or SIT environment? So this is where you define that. Have you all clear? So more in detail about your networking, we will discuss in our module 7. Okay. As part of your module 7, I'll talk in detail about these 3 elements: network, subnet and public IP. Okay. So for now, let's move a bit forward. Let's talk about your placement group. Now understand what your placement group is. Guys, again, I repeat, a lot of information which I'm sharing right now is not there in your slides. Okay. A lot of information which I'm discussing right now, it is not there in your slide. Please pay attention. This is really important information for you to clear your examination and interview. That is the reason why I'm talking about all these details. So humble request, please pay attention. All right. So talking about your placement group. Placement group is more to do with how your instances are hosted in physical data center of AWS. Placement group is more to do with how your instances are hosted in physical data centers of AWS. Right? So normally in physical data centers of AWS, can I say it will have something like this: multiple racks, right? If it's a data center, obviously it would have multiple racks neatly arranged and organized. Yes, everyone. If it's a physical data center, it would have racks. Yes or no? On these racks, which are hosted in AWS data center, there would be physical servers which will be stacked in this rack, something like this. Right? Your physical hosts, which are managed by AWS, physical hardware, which are managed by AWS, will be hosted on this racks, something like this. Now, your placement group is like how your resources are hosted within AWS data center. So there are 3 types of placement group. You have something called as cluster, partition, spread. Cluster, partition and spread. Talking about your cluster placement group. Let's say for an application ABC, you have some 5-6 servers. There are 6 servers on which your application ABC is hosted. So if all the 6 servers are hosted, if you want, you can host all the 6 servers on one single rack. Something like this. All your 6 instances would be hosted on one single physical host, which is part of one single rack. This is called as cluster placement group. This is called as cluster placement group. Now, what is the advantage of your cluster placement group is, if this machine has to intercommunicate with each other, if this 6 instances has to intercommunicate with each other, can I say latency would be bare minimum? Latency would be bare minimum. 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 Latency would Yes, if these machines has to intercommunicate with each other, the latency would be bare minimum, right? So since latency is bare minimum, throughput is high, performance is better, right? That is the advantage of your cluster placement group. Now, what is the disadvantage of your cluster placement group is if this rack goes down, it undergoes some maintenance, or if there is any network related issue or some other issue with this particular rack, can I say it would act as a single point of failure? Agree? So that is advantage and disadvantage of your cluster placement group. Depending on your business requirement, you can decide if you want to deploy in this format or not, right? Then you have next is your partition. So partition is where instead of deploying all instances in one single rack, you create a group and you put it as a partition. You create multiple partition and you deploy as a group on multiple racks. So in this setup, what happens? Instead of deploying all 6 instances in one single rack, you're deploying across 3 different racks. So now what is the advantage is if any rack goes down, it will not act as a single point of failure. The probability of all your entire application going down is when all the 3 racks goes down simultaneously. And all the 3 racks goes down simultaneously, that is where it would impact. If not, still the probability of your business application being up and running is pretty high. That is your partition placement group. That is your partition placement group. Now talking about your spread placement group. Spread placement group is you have one instance hosted on different rack, something like this. You have one instances hosted on the same rack, on the different racks. That is your spread placement group. Are we all clear? Everyone? So partition, can it be? Guys, this is applicable only within the same availability zone. It cannot be between 2 different availability zones. Everyone clear? So it cannot be different data center. Same availability zone. More about this placement group is available in this particular document. Okay. Depending on your business requirement, you can choose. So while launching, if you want to deploy in any of the placement group, enable this. You can say add to new placement group and you can define whether you want cluster, spread or partition. If you say partition, it will say how many partitions you require. Okay. And how many, machines you want to host. If you say spread, it would consider one each. And there is a limitation associated with spread. You can have up to 7 instances or certain limitation. Please check that out. I shared the document. In that document, there is a limitation detail. What's the point of different placement group? So this will allow you to define the availability of your resources within the availability zone. If all your machines are hosted in cluster placement group, your instances will act as a single point of failure. So you can decide in what format you want to deploy so that your resources are highly available within the availability zone. Are we all clear? Everyone? Anjana, is your question answered? Narayan, is your question answered? Quick responses, please. Yes. Anjana, can I have your response quickly? So little confused about placement group. Don't be confused. Don't be confused. It will be just a way you deploy your resources. When you have an application ABC, you want to host it on multiple machines. So they will give you a choice how this multiple machines should be placed in your AWS data center. Do you want all the machines to be part of one single rack? If yes, then select cluster placement group. You want them to be placed as a partition, as a group of certain numbers, then you select your partition placement group. Or you want them, individually placed in different racks, then you select spread placement group. I hope that makes sense now. Cost will be higher in the availability zones. No, placement group they don't charge you for. They don't charge anything separately for your placement group. There is no charges for creating placement group. What if we want in different zones? So that is not possible. It is only within the availability zone. Right? Making sense now, everyone? So now moving a bit forward. Moving a bit forward, talking about capacity reservation. So capacity reservation is all about your reserved instance. It's all about reserved instance. I was telling you about reserved instance sometime back, right? If you want to make reservation, say capacity reservation here, okay? Say create capacity reservation, and you can define what kind of instance, what platform, which availability zone, how many machines, and for how long, okay? And you can create your reservation. So that is how you create your reserved instance or your reservation for your reserved instance. So all the parameters needs to be defined. And if your reservation is defined while you're launching your machine, you can say that, hey, consume one machine from this particular group of your reservation. That is about your capacity reservation. Talking about next part, which is your domain joint directory. Domain joint directory is nothing but if you want an active directory in your cloud, you want your machine to be integrated with your active directory, then AWS gives you a choice to create your directory. So it can be an AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory, or you can integrate with your on-premise Active Directory using AD connector, right? Or you can leverage your Amazon Cognito user pool to connect to your machines. So if you want Active Directory, then you can enable directory and you can select your directory if you have a directory created. If you want your machine to be part of your Active Directory, this is the choice. We already talked about IAM role, so I'm not repeating what your role is all about. Then moving a bit forward, talking about your shutdown behavior. Shutdown behavior, you have two choices, stop and terminate. Stop is nothing but machine will be stopped. Stop is nothing but your machine will be stopped, and your machine can be started at any point of time in future. Terminate is like permanently closing that machine. You can no longer retrieve that machine, or you can no longer retrieve any data from that machine. That is your terminate. When you stop your machine is stopped. Whenever you want in future, you can start your machine. And when your machine is in stopped state, your billing for compute is also stopped. When your machine is in stopped state, your billing is also stopped, right? When your machine is in terminate mode, right, you permanently lose access to your machine. So you can define this. If you shut down your server, should it stop or should it terminate? The choice is yours. So if I stay stop, it will stop and I will have that machine under my control. At any point of time, I can access any data which is available on that machine. Then hibernate mode, I believe everyone understand. It is nothing but your sleep mode. If you want to enable, you can enable that also. enable termination protection. To protect your machine against any kind of accidental termination, you have this choice which is called as enable termination protection. Now that it is your server, you might want to monitor your server. The basic monitoring on your server is for free. The basic monitoring on your server is for free. But if you want a detailed monitoring, you can enable this CloudWatch detailed monitoring, which will come with a cost. Then you have something called as tenancy. You have something called as shared tenancy. You have something called as dedicated instance. And then you have something called as dedicated host. So these are the three different options under your tenancy model: shared, dedicated tenancy, dedicated instance, and dedicated host. So if I talk about shared tenancy, the physical server on which your virtual machine is created, right? So that is shared. So as I was telling earlier also, it could be possible that on the same physical hardware, your machine and your competitor's server could also be hosted, right? I was telling you this in our module, in our week 1 agenda, when we were discussing our week 1's agenda, right? Shared tenancy is where on the same physical hardware of AWS, your virtual server is created. On the same hardware, someone else virtual machine can also be created, right? That is your shared tenancy. You don't have dedicated underlying host. The underlying infrastructure of AWS is in a shared model. Now, when I say dedicated instance, that means what? On top of this physical hardware of AWS, only your instances would be launched. Obviously, it will come with a higher cost in comparison with your shared model. Okay. The underlying host and everything is still managed by AWS, and you don't have any control over underlying host. That is your shared instance model, dedicated instance model. Sorry. Right. And then you have dedicated host model. Dedicated host model is obviously this instances would be completely dedicated for you to use, but the underlying host on which your instance are hosted, that is also dedicated for you to use. Am I making sense? In dedicated host model, the underlying physical hardware will also be dedicated for you to use, and you will have control over it. You can define configuration for the underlying host, which is managed by AWS. Now in this scenario, they would charge you for host as well as for the instance. Let's say if the cost of one instance is $1 per hour, okay, and the cost of host is $2 per hour. If I have 3 instances, can someone tell me what would be my overall cost per hour? Everyone, if the cost of one instance is $1 per hour and the cost of host is $2 per hour, and I have 3 instances, so what would be my overall cost? It would be $5 per hour. It would be $5 per hour because $1 for each instance, so it would be $3 for instance and $2 for the host. Am I making sense? So no other organization can use this dedicated host. It is completely reserved for you to use. Are we clear now? What is your tenancy all about? By default, it is always a shared tenancy. Okay. Dedicated instance is nothing but this underlying host. You will not have control. Still, this would be reserved, right? AWS will not host anyone else instances on this host, but you will not have control over it. In dedicated host, obviously this is reserved for you to use, but you will have control over this underlying host also. That is the only difference. Sweta, making sense? In your dedicated instance model, your instances would be hosted on a dedicated physical host of your organization, but you will not have control over the underlying host. In dedicated host model, your instances are still hosted on a dedicated physical host for your organization. You will also have control over the dedicated host. You will also have the control over the underlying host. Are we clear? Cool. In dedicated instance, you don't pay for the underlying host. In dedicated host model, you'll have to pay for this underlying host. Okay. Please remember this. Next, talking about your credit specification unlimited. Now, to understand this, I want to understand from you guys, what is the purpose of reserved fuel in your vehicles? What is the purpose of reserve fuel in your vehicles? No one drives here. Emergency purpose, travel to make sure it will not stop, threshold to tell us that fill your fuel, make sure it should not empty soon. So can I say reserve fuel is like, even if I'm exhausted of complete fuel, I still can travel few additional kilometer with the same performance? Yes or no? Even though my vehicle is completely exhausted of the fuel, I still, without any interruption, I can still drive for few additional kilometer at the same speed. Agree? Basically, without impacting the performance, even at the peak of utilization. Pay attention what I'm trying to say now. Even at the peak of utilization, right? Without impacting the performance, I can still drive for few additional kilometers. Yes or no? That is what is the purpose of your reserved fuel. Pawan Kumar, any difference of opinion here? So if I was driving at 100 kilometers per hour, even though I'm exhausted of complete fuel, I can still continue driving at 100 kilometers per hour for few additional kilometers. So similarly, in your servers, if your machines are running at peak of its CPU utilization, if your machines are running at peak of your CPU utilization, then without impacting the performance, you have a concept of burstable CPU that will ensure your machines would continue to function normally without impacting the performance of your application. That is referred to as T2, T3 unlimited. It's an unlimited burstable CPU, okay, which will ensure the performance of your application is not impacted. It's a burstable performance configured as unlimited, can sustain high CPU for a long period of time whenever needed. Guys, are we clear? Please refer to this document, which will talk more about it. But on a very high level, it is like that reserve fuel. Even if you're running at peak of your CPU utilization, still the performance of your application would not be impacted. Cool. So now I say next, add storage. Next, add storage. So this is your EBS volume. This 30 GB is the storage capacity of your EBS. Okay. This 30 GB is your storage capacity of your EBS, and this is your EBS. Now there are different types of EBS volume. You have GP2, GP3, IO1, IO2, all of this. So what this signify? This signify the performance. Okay. This signifies the performance. So depending on your business requirement, you can choose different types of volumes. GP3, GP2, IOPS, IO2, IO1. So each of these have their own durability. They have their own latency. They have their own, maximum, minimum, all of these values. So depending on the type of volumes, the performance would vary. Depending on the type of volume, the performance would vary. Making sense with this? So you can decide what should be the size of machine you want. And this is where your root device is where your AMI file would be residing. Your root device type as EBS. So this is where your AMI file, that is your operating system file, which you decided in your step 1, would be residing. Next, add tags. Tags are nothing but identifier. Now, when you have hundreds of machines, you want to quickly filter out this machine. Okay, this machine belongs to my prod environment and has an application XYZ hosted. Then you can tag so that amongst your hundreds of EC2 instances, you can easily filter your machine. Are we all clear? Can I move forward, everyone? Making sense? Great. Thank you. So next, configure security group. We will talk about security group in our tomorrow's session. Not today. In our tomorrow's session, we'll talk about security group, say review and launch. And this is about whatever you are defined, you can quickly review and you can say launch. The moment you click on launch, a new page comes up. Pay attention. The moment you click on launch, a new page comes up saying select an existing key pair or create new key pair. So right now I'm just saying create new key pair. Okay. Pay attention. I say download key pair. Only then it allows me to launch instance. So I'll tell you what is the purpose of key pair in some time. Now we have launched our EC2 instance. Now let us see how long does it take for this machine to be ready for us to use. So in span of next few seconds, you should see this machine is jumping to running state. Right now it is in pending state. It will jump into, okay, running state. Explain instance type like micro and others. So that is nothing but depending on the configuration. Here in step 2, we have defined that. So depending on the CPU configuration, T2 micro, T2 medium, all of this, it is all about how many virtual CPU and how much of RAM you have. There is no other specification about micro, medium, large. Okay. It's all about your instance type. On basis of that, AWS will be billing you or they will be charging you. So you notice my instance is already in a running state now. So remember in our module 1, I told you in your cloud, you can have your resources deployed in span of few seconds. Yes. So we have our instance ready. It is in running state. Obviously, it is getting initialized. Few initial, stabilization of instances needed, right? But I have my instance up and running, right? Guys, are we all clear on how to launch your EC2 instance? Everyone, because we have spent around 90 minutes just to discuss on how to launch your EC2 instance. and I have talked in detail about every step. You'll not find all this information in your slides. A lot of things would not be available in your slide, but I wanted to personally ensure that each one of you is pretty clear. Each one of you is pretty clear with every step. So once again, want to check with each and everyone. Are we all clear? Anyone has any questions, doubts, queries? Because few folks I haven't heard from you for a long time. So I want to personally touch base with you guys. Okay. Wahida, long time I haven't heard from you. Tapassi Roy, long time I haven't heard from you. Nagarjuna Reddy, long time I haven't heard from you. John Victor, long time I haven't heard from you. Gagan Singla, long time I haven't heard from you. Couple of Edureka guests, Dhanalakshmi, Bharat, Beetika. I haven't heard from you guys for a long time now. Can I have your quick responses? Are you along with me so far? What sort of questions would be asked in these steps? So there can be questions from your placement group. They can ask you questions pertaining, okay, what kind, where do you use different types of placement group? They can ask you questions about EBS and instant store. They can ask you questions about your tenancy, shared, dedicated, instance, dedicated host. There can be questions on your instance types like your reserved, on demand, and spot instance. What is the difference and all of that? So these are the topics, these are the major parameters from where they might ask you questions. So now that my machine is ready, right? Since it's a Windows machine, I want to understand from you guys, how do we access our Windows machine? This is a Windows machine. So how do we access our Windows machine? Obviously, RDP connection, right? So I say remote desktop connection. Select this machine, copy the public IP address from here, paste this public IP address, say connect. The moment you connect, it will ask for username and password. Did anywhere while configuring our instance, did we define any username and password? It is asking for username and password here. Did anywhere while configuring, did I define any username or password? No. Then how do I get this username and password? Okay. So select that instance, say connect, say RDP client. Here is the username. Your username is your administrator. So give this username. Now password. Remember we downloaded this key pair file. Say get password. It will ask for this key pair file which is downloaded on your machine. Say browse. Provide this key pair file. Decrypt your password and you will be able to get your password. So are we now clear what is the purpose of the key pair file which we downloaded? Everyone, the key pair file is basically used for the purpose of authentication. With that key pair file, you will be able to get your password. And this is my Windows machine which is coming up now. So let us wait. Let us give it a moment. Because initial setup, yeah. This is my Windows machine. Windows 2019 server. Right? So let us verify the properties. Whatever we asked for, is that machine with the same configuration or a different configuration? So is this a Windows Server 2019 with 1 GB of RAM, one virtual CPU, 64-bit operating system? Yes, we wanted this. This is what we wanted as a configuration. Everyone, so this is your Windows Server 2019 with 1 GB of RAM, one virtual CPU, and we said 30 GB of storage. So you notice this is your EBS volume, 30 GB, 29.9 GB, which is nothing but your 30 GB. And this is where your operating system file, your Windows file, your program files, your application file, all of these are present here in this C drive. Now, are we all clear how to launch your EC2 instance? Does that make sense? And this machine has internet connectivity. This machine has internet connectivity. So let us verify that also. Yes, this machine has internet connectivity as well. Clear, everyone? So now, okay, someone says password part repeat. So to get your password, Pawan, all you have to do is select your machine, say connect, say RDP client, and say get password here. The moment you say get password, it will ask for the key pair file. Remember, just before we could launch, we downloaded a key pair file on my machine. So I need to provide that file. So I say browse, and it is available in my downloads. So I provide that key pair file, and it will help me to get my password. Clear? Pawan Kumar? Cool. That's how you get your password. Now that was on how to launch your Windows machine, how to connect to your Windows machine, right? So now let's move a bit forward. Let's quickly launch a Linux machine. Let's move a bit forward. Okay. Can the key pair file be regenerated? Absolutely, yes. It can be regenerated, but that's a big process. In case, I think your question is, in case if I miss my key pair file, is there a way that I can regenerate? Correct, Akul? That is the context of your question. Yes. So key pair has to be replaced, and there is a process to do that. Okay, replace the lost key pair. How to do that? There is a separate process. You need to follow that. So this is a KB document from AWS, which will help you achieve that. You can regenerate and you can reattach or link with your machine, reassociate with your EC2 instance. Okay, but you need to follow the process. You cannot directly attach from the console. Okay, so that was one thing. Now moving a bit forward, launching a Linux machine this time. So I'll quickly select Linux AMI. Instead of Windows, I've selected Linux. Rest of the configuration aspects, I'm leaving it to default. I'm not defining anything. And in your Windows, the minimum storage required is 30 GB. In your Linux, the minimum storage required is 8 GB for your EBS. Okay. So I'm selecting machine with an 8 GB. So I configure. So we'll talk about security group tomorrow. So I'm not discussing about it right now. And it is not necessary that for every machine I should have a dedicated key pair. I can use an existing key pair also by just saying choose an existing key pair. So I already have this key pair with 2106. I'm going to use the same. Okay. So now I've initiated a launch of my Linux machine. Okay. So this is my Linux machine which is coming up. Yes, my Linux machine is now ready to use. Now, for Windows, we connected using RDP. How do we connect our Linux machine? Windows, you all said that it should be an RDP based. For Linux, some SSH client or your PuTTY software or your Mobaxterm software, something like that. Yes or no? Ideally, to connect to your Linux machine, use your softwares like PuTTY, Mobaxterm, or have SSH client, right? So I'll show you how to connect using PuTTY, but to connect using PuTTY, you should have your PuTTY software downloaded on your local machine, and along with that, you also require another software called as PuTTY-Gen. You need to download this PuTTY-Gen on your local machine. So I have it in my machine, sharing this URL so that you can download your PuTTY-Gen software. Okay. So you need PuTTY-Gen and you require PuTTY. So you need to have both this installed on your machine. You need to have both of this installed on your machine. So first starting with PuTTY-Gen. Now what is the purpose of PuTTY-Gen? Please understand very clearly. The key pair file which I downloaded, the key pair file downloaded is of .pem format. If you notice here, it says PEM file, PEM, PEM format. So your PuTTY will not understand PEM format. So what you're going to do is, you will say PuTTY-Gen, convert this PEM format into PPK, PuTTY private key file format. Okay. So this is your PuTTY key gen. Say load. Under download, say all files. Select your PEM file. Say OK. Save private key. Save private key. Say yes. It will ask for a name. Give any name of your choice. So I'll name it as Ganesh Prashant 2106 PPK, and I'm saving this file. So now I have my PPK file ready. Okay. Next, I'll open my PuTTY software here. Select my Linux machine, copy this public IP address. On my PuTTY host name, I'll enter that public IP address. Then here in the left window of your PuTTY, you have something called as SSH. So next to SSH, you have a plus icon. Click on that. Once you click on that plus icon, it will further give you other choices. There you'll have one of the option called auth. Click on that. You will have an option called browse private key. Say browse here and browse, select your PPK file. Say open. Say yes, and it will show you a page like this. Let me increase the font size. I don't want you guys to strain. Yes. So you will see a screen like this where it is asking for a username, default username. So remember, for your Linux, the default username is ec2 minus user. Hit enter and you're into your Linux machine. You're into your Linux machine. Now, if you want to log in as root user, say super user do minus I. That is nothing but your sudo minus I. And from your EC2 install, EC2 user, you are now switched to your root user of your Linux machine. Are we all clear? Everyone, it did not ask for password because you already provided your key PPK file. You have already provided your PPK file, right? So it will not ask for password. That PPK file is used for the purpose of authentication. So this is how you launch your Linux machine, and this is how you connect to your Linux machine. Now, one more thing. Let's verify the configuration. So this is your 8 GB of hard disk. This is your EBS volume which is attached to this machine. Remember, while launching, I said 8 GB is what available for your Linux. So this is that 8 GB. Right? Now let's say over the period of time, as a requirement in my business, I want to increase this size. Let's say I want to increase by 1 GB. Then how do I do that? So select your Linux machine, select your machine, click on storage, scroll down, click on this volume, click on this volume, and you will land up on a page like this. Select that volume, say action, say modify volume. Currently it is 8 GB. I want to make it 9. So I'll say it 9. I'll say modify. Say yes. Close this off. Now come back here. Now come back here and say lsblk. Earlier it was just 8 GB. Now do you see it has changed to 9 GB? Yes or no? Everyone? Are we all clear? This is how you upgrade your storage. This is how you upgrade your storage on your EC2 instances. This is the same way you do for your Windows also. Okay? The process for upgrading your storage is same for your Windows or any other operating system. So all you have to do is select that volume, go to your EC2 dashboard. I'll repeat quickly, pay attention. Select that instance, say storage, click on volume, select that volume, say action, say modify volume. Whatever size you want to add, you specify. Let's say if I want to make it 10, say 10. Whatever you want to specify that and say update. Okay. Now that was on how to upgrade your existing storage. Now, in case if I want to add an additional volume, let's say create volume with 1 GB of RAM, 1 GB of memory, 1 GB of storage space. Okay, and I say create volume. Now, if I want to attach this 1 GB to my Linux machine, how do I do that? So select that machine, that volume, say action, say attach volume. Select your Linux machine here. Okay, say attach. So earlier we saw on how to increase the existing volume capacity. Now we are seeing how to add an additional volume. You saw this? You see this? This was existing volume and this is a new volume which I have attached. Everyone, are we clear? Yes. So how to attach your new volumes? How to upgrade your existing volume, right? So what is the difference between adding and updating? See, both are providing you additional storage, but there is a difference that you have C drive, D drive, and E drive, right? In your laptops. Why do you partition different volumes? Why do you say C drive, D drive, E drive? To segregate your data. You keep all your system related information in your C drive. You keep all your personal information in your D drive and stuff. Yes or no? So this will help. Now under this, what does this represent? Why it says XVDA1, right? And why it says 8 GB? So it is nothing but unpartitioned. Okay, it is nothing but unpartitioned. So when you take your hard disk, by default, when you purchase your laptop, your hard disk comes with 500 GB. So that is a single 500 GB. Yes or no? And then you start partitioning. You say C drive and you allocate certain space. You say D drive and you allocate certain space. You say F drive and you allocate certain space. Agree with me? That's how you go about it. So right now it says my total is 9 GB. Out of that, one partition is of 8 GB. A mounted partition of 8 GB. Now if I want, I can create one more partition with 1 GB. Are we clear, everyone? Yes. So that is how you attach or you add your existing volumes or upgrade your existing storage. Manoj, which part do you want me to repeat? This is nothing but, okay, I'll make it very simple. You have your laptop. In your laptop, when you purchase, by default, does it come with C drive, D drive, E drive, and so on? Or you have only one hard disk with 500 GB of storage? Obviously, it would be only one hard disk with 500 GB. Yes or no? Manoj, it does not come partitioned, right? It comes as a single disk. Then why do you partition it basically? For your convenience, right? You say C drive, this amount of space. You say D drive, this amount of space. You say E drive, this amount of space. So when I say XVDA, so this is your unpartitioned amount of storage. Now out of this 9 GB, I have created one partition of 8 GB. Now if I want, I can create one more partition of 1 GB. I have buffer available. An XVDP is because we added an additional volume. That is like in second hard disk of this machine. Clear now? Cool. So now moving a bit forward, moving a bit forward, right? So let's say if there is certain data which is stored on this particular volume and I want to create a backup of this data, then how do I do that? If there is certain data which is stored in this particular volume, I want to create a backup of it, then all I have to do is select that volume, say action, say create snapshot, say create snapshot. So your snapshot when created, it will act as a backup of your volume. So even if your original volume, let's say if I detach this volume, okay, even if I detach this volume and I delete this volume, right, it does not make any difference. Whenever I want that data in future, I can easily retrieve using that snapshot. Again, even if the original volume gets deleted, it does not make difference because in future, if I want that data, I can go to that snapshot, select that snapshot, say create volume, say create volume. So all my data could be easily recovered. Are we all clear what is snapshot? So snapshot is like creating a point in time backup of your data in the volume, so that any point in time in future, if you want to retrieve that data from your snapshot, you can create new volume, and once your volume is created, you can attach this volume to your EC2 instances. That's it. You can attach it to your EC2 instance. What about size of snapshot? So it would be of the same. They will charge you for creating snapshots also. Obviously, size of your snapshot is way lesser in compared to your volume, because if both were of the same size, then it makes no sense to create snapshot, right? Snapshot applicable for both root and additional space added. Yes, you can create snapshot of your root volume as well. Root cannot be deleted? Root cannot be deleted. No, you cannot detach your root volume. You cannot delete your root volume, because that is where your operating system file is present. Are we clear? And guys, let me tell you, snapshot is chargeable. So when you're practicing, if you're done, please delete it once you're done. Everyone, are we clear? How I know file in attached is attached or root storage? Okay, so your question is, I guess, how do I know the file which I'm storing, is it in my root volume or is it in additional attached volume? Is that your question, Manoj? So in your Windows machine, while you're saving any file, do you get a visibility where you're storing that file? Whether it is in C drive, D drive, E drive? Yes? Yes or no? When you're storing any file in your Windows machine, you have a clear-cut visibility in which volume you're storing your data. Agree with me? So same goes in Linux also. In your Linux also, this storage, you can access this storage path. You can access your storages also. So you have directories created, okay? And you can access this. So you need to mount your volumes and you can access your mounted volumes. Clear? Can we have a GUI? No. By default, we don't have GUI for your Linux. How I know it takes 100 stored without corrupt? I did not understand your question. So this free tier instance, will it stay even if I shut? I mean, to ask if I can access the same EC2 instance later on. Absolutely, yes. You can access this at the later point in time also. I'll come to it. Please have some patience. I'll come to it. Any other question? Linux GUI, is it possible or not in AWS? See, by default, there is no Linux GUI. But if you want, you can enable. There are documents available in the internet. Okay, like how you normally do in your on-premises. The same way you can create GUI, because AWS has nothing to do with it. AWS has nothing to do with it. Any other question? So you can say df minus h. So you can say cd slash dev slash xvda 1. So this is your storage. This is your storage. Okay. Okay. Now, okay, we hardly have a minute. So let me show you how to shut down your machine. So you come back to your EC2 dashboard. If you want to stop this machine, select that machine, say stop instance. So when you stop instance, it is going to stop your machine. Okay. It is going to stop your machine. And whenever you want, you can start this machine later in point of time. Right. But if I terminate, let's say if I want to terminate this machine, okay, to terminate for this machine, I had enabled termination protection. So by default, when I try to terminate, it will throw me an error. Okay. First, we'll need to disable termination protection. We'll need to disable termination protection. So I say change termination protection, which was enabled. Disable that. Save it. Instant state. Terminate. Terminate is like permanently losing that instance. Now I had stopped this machine. If I want to access this machine again, I can select, I can say start instance, and my machine will start again. But once terminated, I cannot. Are we clear? Yes. So this is now terminated. So if I select this and if I say instant state, I don't have any other choice. You notice this? I cannot start, I cannot reboot, hibernate, nothing is possible. Only terminate is the option. So this is the major difference between your stop and terminate. Now my Linux machine is started again. So someone was asking me, where do we use our PEM file? So if you have SSH client, right? Like on my machine, I have enabled SSH. So I have SSH client installed. So I'll directly go to the directory where I have my PEM file. Okay. And I can connect to this machine. Say connect, say SSH client, copy this example, Come back here, paste, hit enter, say yes. And this is my Linux machine. So from my command prompt or from my terminal, I can directly connect using the PEM file. If I don't have SSH client on my local machine, then I would need to rely on PuTTY and all of that. And there I'll need to convert my PEM file, PEM file into PPK format. Are we all clear with this? Everyone? Great. So I hope you all enjoyed the session. I hope whatever I had put across, you were able to understand very clearly. We'll still have some more things to discuss on our this module, module 4. We'll continue with that tomorrow. So yes, with this note, I would like to rest my words here. Okay. So thank you so much for all your time and patience. Really appreciate it. I'll see you all tomorrow. Till then, bye-bye. Take care. Wish you all a great day. Okay, Pawan says, please unmute once. So Pawan, you would need to make it real quick because I have a meeting at 9:15. So let me know if your query is something which can be done in span of 5 to 7 minutes. If not, please keep it for tomorrow because I need to jump on another meeting at 9:15.
Will you cover all 175 plus services of AWS? No. Do you have expertise on machine learning? Do you have expertise on IoT? Do you understand satellite technology? No, right? Yes, Pawan, you are unmuted.
Yeah, thanks, Energy. Actually, my question is, for suppose I take the backup, you are saying the snapshot, right? For suppose it is 100%, it is reached, and means it is take the backup. How to I can validate? For suppose something it is happened in intermediate state. If it is not possible to restore, right?
It is point in time backup.
If any validation point is this.
When you say any validation point, how do you validate in your on-premises? Just want to understand.
Yeah, no. For suppose I can say in MPLS, if we have the MD5 digest command is there. If it is
MPLS is your
I
networking
upload file
point.
and
Hold on. That is a
no,
verification process to check the integrity.
Yeah.
That is to check the integrity. When you say MD5, you verify MD5 signature. If the signature matches, that is your integrity. So integrity is different
right.
than the backup validation. The backup is nothing but getting your file backed up. Whenever you want, you can recover those files. MD5 does not signify that whatever data you have sent is completely received on the other side. MD5 is if you have sent an encrypted file on other side, if they want to check if that is the same file or if there is any tamper which is being done. So they give you that MD5 key. If you punch those MD5 key and if you're able to see the same length, then yes, the data is not, or the file is not tampered.
Yeah, you are right. I am expecting same type of facility in backup.
In backup, you don't have that mechanism. In backup, you don't have that mechanism. See, backup is like you are just creating something for your future reference. Okay, you're going to use it for your future reference. Like for example, I have some file in my mobile, so I take that backup in my laptop. Now, how do I ensure that the file is available or not? That file should be present. That is the only point of reference, or that is the only point of validation.
Okay, fine.
Making sense?
Yeah, fine. Actually, my question is, it is 100%.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please. Actually, it is 100% take the backup or not. That validation case I'm asking, not more. That's enough.
Yeah, I understood. So you are talking is, if I have 100 files, is 100 files backed up or not? Is there a way I can check that out? In very layman language, that is what your question is.
right? So
Yeah,
if
correct.
there are 100 files,
Correct,
when you
correct.
create snapshot, it will ensure to create backup of entire 100 files. Point in time backup. At that point of time on this particular storage, whatever files are there, everything would be taken as a backup.
Okay. Is it possible to view means like to check physical checkup like?
Yeah, from snapshot you create a volume and there you can verify. On your snapshot you cannot verify.
Okay. Manual.
Yeah, it has to be manual
Okay.
task. It has
Fine.
to be
Thanks for
manual
support.
task. Cool. All right. Any other question from anyone? No questions? Okay. Prasanna, I would request you to please check Edureka portal. Give me 1 second. One second. So yeah, here you have the, detailed curriculum. Request you to please check this part on what all we'll be discussing as part of this course. All those details are available in this particular portal. The entire detailed curriculum is there and we'll go as per the curriculum. Okay. Cool. So thank you so much, guys. I'll see you all tomorrow. Till then, bye-bye. Take care. Wish you all a great evening, great day ahead. Signing off for the day.